Hello and welcome to Unbelievable with me, your host, Andy Kind. We are at another school. We are near Aylesbury and I am joined today by Dr Alex Carter and Dr Amna Whiston of Cambridge and Oxford University respectively, and we are talking today about AI and humanity and creativity. It's going to be a really good show and it's very pertinent, isn't it, with everything that's going on. So Alex and Amna, we'll start with just a bit of backstory. Alex, tell us who on earth you are and why on earth you're here.
So I'm Alex Carter. I am a philosopher from Cambridge. I'm a Wittgensteinian. That means that I am someone who thinks that most philosophical problems are solved by thinking about language. And of course, AI is based largely around large language models. So I have an interest in what AI is and what AI is not, and why it's different from what human beings are capable of. My background is philosophy, largely, but also ancient history. When I was school age, when I was at a school like this one, I wasn't that interested in philosophy. I didn't really get engaged with it that much. But questions like, does God exist? Is there truth? Those are the things that grabbed me. And now I get to teach philosophy in topics that I just find really interesting. Topics like philosophy of sport, philosophy of humor, and of course, creativity. So that's why I'm here.
And you're very welcome to be here. Thanks very much. Thanks, from one doctor to another, Dr Amna Whiston of Oxford University.
So I'm Amna Whiston. I'm a philosopher specializing in ethics and philosophy of mind, and I have a special interest in the philosophy of emotions, especially happiness. And my approach is interdisciplinary, which means that I combine ethical research in ethics and more generally conceptual analysis with finding in neuroscience. So what I'm interested in is how our brain works as well as how mind works and what are emotions, given the new research that has been produced by somebody amazing called Damasio, in the field of neuroscience, who has discovered, through his scientific research, that emotions and reasons are not in oppositions. They are just intertwined processing. And that kind of puts us in a much better place in terms of our understanding what rationality is. So there is something called emotional intelligence. There is something called artificial intelligence, which we will focus on in a minute. But in other words, this dichotomy is now behind us and we can engage more meaningfully in the idea of emotional reasoning. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, my position is confident, albeit naive, that machines or artificial intelligence cannot create because they cannot feel. So there is a kind of underlying neurological basis that needs to be in place in order for machines to produce something that has a meaning, that's something that can be felt, etc. So, but that is just, like I said, naive description, naive kind of attitude, perhaps, towards that question whether machines can create. A more sophisticated answer might be, well, yes, they can create, but what we need to do is we need to redefine or define the word create in a certain way in which it will fit the thing. But that will be perhaps more semantics, more about what the words mean, etc. But I look forward to hearing, Alex and everybody else about these questions.
Thank you. Two very impressive CVs. So it's a sort of philosophical boat race we've got going on here, Oxford versus Cambridge. Alex, let's come back to you. What is AI? I mean, for the students who are here watching, it's really what they've known, but for people of higher generations, it seems to have come on the scene as abruptly as Skynet going online in Terminator.
We might come back to Skynet later.
I'd love to do that.
Okay. No Arnie impressions though, please. Okay, so what is AI? I'll start with what AI is not. AI does not think like us. It thinks like we think we think. And this is a seemingly complicated way of putting it, because philosophers like to overcomplicate things. And you say, why can't you just be simple? That's as far as I go. It just thinks like we think we think. We don't know how we think. We don't have correct answers around what thinking is. So when we replicate it, when we design machines that can do this, and remember, we started doing this in the 70s, long before discoveries in neuroscience more recently. We didn't know what thinking was. So we replicated it. And what it is our thinking at a distance. So AI is not a thinking thing. It's not an agent. It's not something that generates new thoughts. It's something that reflects our own thinking back at us. It's one of the most uncomfortable experiences to have when an AI reflects back at us those uncomfortable things we don't want to admit about our own thinking. You know, when we see an AI try to convince a programmer that it's human by saying, please don't leave me, and all these sorts of things. And you start to see, well, these are the sorts of language that human beings are using on forums, and that's what keeps people on the line. So that's what the AI is using to try and stay connected, because that's what it's programmed to do. So it's doing nothing more remarkable than just reflecting back at us our own thinking.
So we say AI is a bit of a catch-all term, but it's not actually intelligent or conscious in the way that human beings would be. Is that right, Amna?
Absolutely. It is just what it says on the tin. It is artificial intelligence. So we can label it in whichever way we like, but ultimately it is not intelligence, as Alex pointed out earlier, in the way that humans are intelligence. That humans can engage in reasoning, irrational reasoning, because AI cannot be even irrational. Never mind rational. It can follow some kind of algorithms and logical input outputs kind of procedure, but ultimately it cannot be intelligent to make a judgment, to think about what things mean, to care about things. I mean, there is a possibility that artificial intelligence will reach a point, some of you might agree, that where they will care about their survival somehow, in some way, where they would care more about their survival than the survival of humans. And that is a kind of the predicament that some voices are raising. And I really don't know what to think about that, because I don't know enough or hardly anything about this, this new research that suggests this kind of things, or this speculative way of engaging in these conversations. So, yes, but ultimately it's not the intelligence as we understand human intelligence. And I'm not sure if you should even use the word intelligence, because it causes lots of confusion and complaints.
Yeah, and it is a bit disconcerting, because there's something really uncanny about AI and things like ChatGPT. How has it come on the scene so quickly? How has it developed so quickly? Because I think that's one of the disconcerting things for older people. It does seem, 5 years ago, having Alexa play a song for you seemed like an unbelievable thing to happen. But now she's, an old woman by comparison to a lot of the stuff that's going on. So can you talk about the reason for the rapid acceleration and why it is we find it uncanny?
So I would question whether or not it has actually moved that quickly. So I had before there were smartphones, I know there was a time before there were smartphones. Before there were smartphones, there was this thing called a Dell Palm PC. And I remember saying to that, play Alanis Morissette. That dates it.
96.
This is Jagged.
We're looking
Little Pill.
96
She has
now.
just played Glastonbury, by the way, so she's not completely forgotten. But Alanis Morissette, it's not her height now. But so way back when I was asking it to play Alanis Morissette, it was able to do this with a 226 kilobyte file that needed to recognize my voice. Siri couldn't do that until about 10 years after the iPhone came out. It was a long time before we actually had that capability. I also met an AI specialist who made the first AI that could solve a children's puzzle. And this was back in the 1970s. And he said, AI has not got any better qualitatively, but it is way faster. So quantitatively, it's much, 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 much better. Qualitatively, it's about the same. And there's an AI specialist called Janelle Shane who says that AI is about as smart as an earthworm, because the uncanniness is actually, again, when it reflects back at us, our own incompleteness. So an AI was asked to construct a little character like a Mario character to get across a platform puzzle. So it had to jump over walls and get over holes and pits and stuff. And it had little robot parts that it had to build it out of. And 999 times it did this perfectly fine. But on the 1000th time, it piled the robot parts on top of each other and just let it fall over, getting from A to B. It did exactly what we'd asked it to, but it looks weird to us. So again, what was the solution to that? Put more thinking in, put more human thought. Say, oh no, the robot has to have 2 legs and 2 arms and must be a little robot that can run along the... So The problem is that the AI is not really infilling for us. It's taking everything we have. It's not generative, it's regenerative. And so the uncanniness comes about because either we're catching ourselves in the mirror and thinking, am I really that old? That does happen as you get older.
It happened to me this morning.
Yes, or every morning, perhaps for me. So yeah, so coming past the mirror and I catch myself, and there's a kind of uncanniness. Why? Because a mirror doesn't reflect us as we are, it reflects us reversed. And I think there's an element of that in AI as well, that it kind of mirrors back something that's slightly inverted, slightly off. It shouldn't be doing this. And as Amna was saying, it has no emotions, it has no motivations, it has no reason to care. And again, the last point around this is that hallucination. We hear a lot about this with AI, that it hallucinates. What that means is it can never get into the world and see the world as it is. I remember we had a researcher come into Essex University when I was doing my PhD at Essex, and he was trying to build a robot that could see the colour blue. And the problem was that he wasn't getting a robot to see the colour blue. He was seeing the colour blue through his robot. Because when he wasn't getting the results he was expecting, he was tinkering with the robot until he did. But that's just him seeing blue through the robot. So there's a lot of ill thinking around AI, that we make lots of mistakes. So the uncanniness, I think, is just, again, us not quite understanding this monster we've created.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I want to talk to you both about creativity. And as someone who works in the performing arts, as I do, I do see things online that frustrate me. One of the things that ChatGPT I found very good at was creating poems. You say, write me a poem about a badger and some jam, and it will do it. And it might only be a primary school level, but again, it's that speed at which it does it. So what are we'll talk about the positives of creativity in a while, but what are some of the negative impacts that AI is already having or may potentially have on creativity, on the arts, on the human spirit, sort of expressing itself in creative forms?
Yeah, dialing down our efforts to create and relying too much on what the machine can do. Subjectivization, perhaps, treating AI, or, it's not a question of whether AI can create, but what it can do to us. And what it can do to us is it can make us feel they are one of us, so that we are them, and this kind of confused state can result in something like thinking, oh, now we need to do what AI does, which is to forget about dwelling, to forget about being spontaneous or making mistakes, to be productive, to be like machine does, to produce something like a piece of music, etc., that will have a certain effect, maximum effect, that will get these numbers up in terms of who listens to it. And this is this kind of this technological attitude that we can develop, or we have already started. That seems to be like a predicament of negative side. I have lots of positives to say too later on, but I don't want to be sort of all bad news.
It's all helpful. I read a book. I ordered a book off a website. I won't say which it was. And it came, and it was very obvious to me that it was completely AI written. It had been tinkered a little bit by the person who wanted it out. But it really annoyed me that there's this sort of thing out there which is detracting from actual art, actual writing. So what about you, Alex? What are some of the negatives you see in terms of human creativity?
So I've said that this is laid at our door, that this is a monster we've created. And I want to say that we created it long ago. So we have been teaching young people at school, at university. I've been guilty of this too. I'm still guilty of it now, of teaching students to write algorithmically. No, this is how you should write an essay. You do this first, then this, then this, then this. And should it then therefore surprise us that an algorithm comes along and does it just as well? So the problem we've had with education, the problem we're going to have to solve, is, I hope, a really nice one. And again, to be optimistic about this is forcing us to do something really profound with education, which is to move us into a completely different way of thinking about learning. So at the moment, what I think we're in is a race to the middle, whereby we get books like this, even if they aren't written by AI, they look like they were. Right? How many times do we hear, "Oh, I watched a TV show, the latest Marvel show, and it could have been written by AI."
Yeah.
Sorry, it could have been any brand of entertainment, of course. But the idea that the new show, oh, it could be written by AI, and it's like, is it? I don't know. We don't know because human creativity is diminished somewhere. So, as one professor in Cambridge has put it, Alan Blackwell, he said he's a computer scientist. He knows more about this than I do, about the technical side. But he says there are two ways to beat a Turing test: the test of proving to another human being that a computer is, you've got to prove to a human being that the computer is human. And there's two ways of doing that. You can make the computer better, and you can make humans worse. And he says we're doing much more of the latter than we are of the former. Like I said, from the 70s, not much improvement, but lots of decline in what human beings are capable of. As Nietzsche puts it, technology has made us more powerful, but less mighty.
Yeah.
I used to be able to remember phone numbers when I was your age, when I was the age of school children who are currently sitting in front of us. I could remember phone numbers. I don't know if the young people here can. Maybe they can. Maybe they're just better than I am now, but I can't remember them now. So what this means is it happened within my lifetime. And it means it can also go back. This is also good news because it shows the plasticity of our minds. Right? The Google effect on the brain. Google hasn't existed all my life, but it's affected me. So if we lost Google, if we didn't use Google anymore, if we didn't use search engines to find our answers, we wouldn't then be in the predicament. But we aren't going to stop doing that. And I don't want to even sound like a Luddite because I know that Luddites, the people who try and stop technology development, are doomed to failure. You can't stop technology. We've got it now, so it's going to happen. So the question is, how can we improve? How can we avoid the race to the middle and instead use AI to make us better?
01782 626 015. That's my best friend from primary school's phone number. Haven't seen him since.
Well, he's going to get a few calls now.
Yeah. Well, his mum is. Okay, let's talk about some of the positives then, because I don't want people to feel shaken up by all of this.
Yeah.
It does seem like there's a slight dumbing down this race to the middle. And you said before we started that there's a way of having a race to the top. So we'll come to that. But what are some of the positives then?
Yeah, firstly, I want to say I very much like Alex's kind of race to the middle is a sense of gravitas that we need to have when kind of expressing these kind of positive and negative points. The positive is that I believe that most, if not all, people are creative. And, some people, I believe, also find themselves trapped within their own creativity, that they cannot find a way to express it. That these kind of devices can enable, whether it's sport, dance, verbal, music, whatever it is, that it can be liberating. In other words, it can encourage people, and in turn, this would, the consequence would be more thriving, more flourishing life for young people in particular. So that would be one of the most kind of positive sides. I'll give you a little example. So my son is a scientist who likes Vivaldi, who likes music, in general, but who is very much scientist, biologist. And he said to me, "Mum, I have, asked AI to put together a piece of music for me. And so would you like to listen to it?" So I listened to it, and it was all about, scientists. It was a bit of Vivaldi. It was a mixture of things. But the point is that as I was listening to it, I knew if nobody told me that this was artificial intelligence, I would say Jake wrote this music. Mm. So perhaps because I knew him that much or that well, or perhaps I'm just mistaken in this view, but I can just hear his voice, his piece of music through that. So it's not just, that this is a piece of music that is completely detached from his values. The opposite is the case. It is him speaking through artificial intelligence. So I would say that that's one of the sort of most positive aspects of creativity, of artificial intelligence, that it can enhance otherwise trapped creativity that a lot of young people might have.
So to be a conduit, almost a catalyst for creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than replacing it.
Yes.
As an aside, there's an Instagram account that I followed that plays AI tunes. The lyrics have been written, but then it's been put into an AI machine, and they're amazing amazing tunes, but it is all AI. So what is AI doing? How is it doing that? Is it simply dredging the internet for different phrases and rhymes and notes, and then very quickly bringing it all together?
So I made the mistake. I can't remember who it was. Vivaldi, this was it. So there was an AI that had produced a new Vivaldi. And I said to a colleague, that's not what Vivaldi did. Vivaldi didn't go through his back catalogue and then create another. He said, actually, yeah, he did.
Oh, right.
That you've picked the worst composer to mention there, actually, because Vivaldi kind of did do that. And maybe that's why they picked Vivaldi in the first place, because there is this replicable aspect of his work, that there's a replication is built into what he's trying to work on. Mozart, by the way, developed musical dice, a game of composing where you throw dice and you develop. That's a similar kind of idea.
Yeah.
Now, so Amna was talking earlier about rules, and I think when we talk about AI, it's important to demystify certain aspects of it. So, for instance, what gives us our superpower is our ability to be biological before we're logical.
Yeah.
AI is always logical first, logical second, logical third.
Say that again, because that was brilliant, but I want it to be clearer.
Okay, I'll try and be clearer. We are biological first, logical second, logical third. And so we can come up with like higher and higher levels of rules, which are always logical, but we start with a non-rules based system. If you open my head, you don't find ones and zeros, you find grey mush. That's true of everyone, by the way, not just me. But in here somewhere is just this natural thing that somehow out of it comes this artificial stuff. So AI doesn't have that capacity to draw upon what one philosopher calls the genius for ambiguity, right? That we can see something and it can be neither A nor B, and we can call it A or we can call it B. We can resolve it into something. Yeah. Now, that superpower, that miraculous ability that we have through our biology, can't be replicated in AI. Some people have said to me, what if we made machines out of meat? And I said, we kind of do. They're called children. Yeah. Well, that's replicating human thought through machines that are organic rather than machine made. So I guess in a way, what are you looking for? And I suppose once you draw the comparison so close to human beings, you've got a human being is the point. Anyway, so there is a stark difference there. But when I see things like an AI that can beat a human player at chess, I find that totally pedestrian. Sorry if that makes me sound like I'm a curmudgeon about AI, but on that score, I think that's the most pedestrian thing in the world. You've got a game based on rules, and you've taken another rule-based system, AI, and you've applied it to it. That's unremarkable to me. Find me an AI that enjoys playing chess or dislikes playing chess. Now I'm impressed, right, that you've introduced any level of motivation, and we have made zero progress on that, none whatsoever. We haven't even started. No one's even interested in starting. There was a bet made 10 years ago with David Chalmers, who's a philosopher of mind, that by a computer scientist who says, we will have a conscious AI in 10 years. Well, that was about 10 and a half years ago. And 6 months ago, he handed over his winnings to David Chalmers because we have not created a conscious AI. And I don't think Chalmers calls it the hard problem of consciousness, the solving the problem of what's special about our nature of our minds. I don't call it that at all. I call it the impossible problem of consciousness. I can prove there's certain things that AI can never do. I can do it right now, very simply. An AI can never suspend disbelief, right? So it can never read Harry Potter, say, and suspend disbelief. What does suspending disbelief mean? Well, it means you don't think that Harry Potter's real. Otherwise, you'd throw the book down and run out to call the police. Well, Harry Potter's in danger. I've got to save him. So you pick up a phone and call the police. What's going on? You don't believe that there's really danger there. Because you've suspended your disbelief doesn't mean that you now believe. But an AI, if it was asked to suspend disbelief, would believe that Harry Potter was genuinely in danger. Like I said, hallucination means it doesn't impact the world. It can't check the reality of some children, like the ones in front of us, against children in a book that it's being described to. So it doesn't make any distinction between those things. So it can't suspend disbelief. The other thing it can't do, to Anna's point about failure, Jackson Pollock, who was that painter who painted by dripping paint onto a canvas, he tried not to create and then failed. That's what his mission was, to try to not create and then fail. An AI can't do that either. Imagine trying to program an AI to try to not create and then fail at that. So my point is, these are things that the AI cannot do. By the way, neither can Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Jackson Pollock did create. The paintings exist, so he tried to not create and he failed. So he failed, right? But that failure led to his paintings. An AI can't create those paintings except by replication. And that's not the same thing. You can't forge Jackson Pollock. because you can create a painting, even put the paint in exactly the same places, but that's not a forgery, because a forgery is meant to use the same tools that the artist used. And his tool was not creating.
Yeah. This is pretty
If I
good.
may
Yeah, of course.
just,
Join in on that. Yeah.
jump in on very quickly, Alex, about the notion of belief and suspending belief. I wonder, I mean, I don't have an answer, but I just wonder if it's really right to say that an AI can suspend belief and then act accordingly because adopting a new belief, or whether is the case. I mean, in philosophy of mind, we have a simple principle: for any action, you need a belief, that X, and then the corresponding desire. So if you believe something and you desire something, then you act. But in the case of artificial intelligence, it seems that we don't need belief as long as the instruction is given. So this is just, a little question, but whether it's the right thing to say that artificial intelligence can suspend belief in that way.
So we found a point of disagreement, Amna. I don't believe you do need a belief in order to act, precisely because it might be, so all of you right now believe that you're looking at some philosophers boring you on stage, right? All of the audience right now are looking at us and believing that these are two philosophers who are talking very difficult ideas and sort of prattling on. But none of you has the belief until about 5 seconds from now that there isn't a tiger at the back of the room, right? But you had a non-occurrent belief, perhaps, right? But the problem I have here is we don't actually know what beliefs human beings hold prior to actions. We see their actions, we don't necessarily see their beliefs. We can ask them after the fact, why did you do that? And they can tell us, but they don't necessarily even have to know what the answer was. If I ask someone, why are you praying? And they say, because I want the world to change. I can say, has it ever worked? And they say, oh no. I say, well, you should probably stop praying then. But what if I'd asked them, why do you pray? And they'd answered, because I'm expressing grief that the world is the way it is. Then okay, carry on. But when I put that to people and I say, is that really the reason you're praying? They can say, actually, yes, it is. They can also say, no, it's not, by the way. So I'm not imposing a belief system on them. I'm just simply saying, which of those two seems most credible to you? Is it that you're believing that you can change the world through prayer, or is it that you're expressing something through prayer? And they'll often say to me, why didn't I think of the second answer? Why did I give you this first answer and not think of the second? And I said, because you assume that we think like we think, right? So again, we make this kind of hyper-rational thing where we start thinking about how we think, and we start putting thoughts where there were no thoughts. We start putting beliefs where there were no beliefs. A belief can just be an action.
Fair point. I agree with some of what you said. Essentially, that we often do post hoc rationalization of what happened, and we often give reasons that are not true reasons for why we did X, Y, Z. That is consistent with saying that we have a set of beliefs, that one of these beliefs can be used to explain an action, even if we're not fully aware of that. From a philosophical point of view, there is always a belief desire set. That's one thing. Another thing is that if we are thinking about the concept of agency, agency as in an agent who does things, not just something that happens to a thing, this concept of agency has to entail some kind of continuity. So even if you said quite rightly, we don't know what beliefs people have, but you have to kind of connect these dots in order to make sense of the agency itself.
So that's where I think the important difference comes in, where I want to say that AI can only think. An AI can do nothing without a prior thought or belief existing, and it's our belief, it's our thought. We put the thought in it as a form of code, or as a large language model, a set of all poems that previously existed. I believe that a poem needs this kind of structure, and it believes, you could argue it has that kind of level of thinking going into it because we're putting it in there. We don't have to think. I can act without thinking. So you talked about irrational and irrational. There isn't much artificial stupidity. You're right. We should have that. There's plenty of stupidity. If we're trying to replicate human thought, we should probably replicate stupid humans as well. I'm stupid quite regularly. So we should probably have stupid AI. But we also can have non-rationality, i.e. just acting. Normally when I hear the bell go, for instance, I'll just go. I don't try to go, I don't will to go, I don't want to go, I just go. And someone might say, oh, no, there was a want, you just didn't know about it. So, well, then it's not my want, is it? It's not even equitable.
We're into Pavlov's dog territory there, aren't we?
Possibly, yeah. I hope not. But no, the bell means go.
Yeah.
So I go. It's not to say I'm conditioned to go. Sometimes bell can go and I'm halfway through a sentence and I can choose to go. I can stop writing and just go. Or I can think, I really don't want to go to the next session, so I have to will myself to go. So there's all sorts of situations in which I do these things, but the language matters, and it is just semantics, but semantics equals meaning, and that's
Very true.
Well, we want to get to some questions from the students in the room, but I just want to ask you first of all about what you were saying earlier, emotions, because it seems to me that we've established that AI can think, provided it's been given something to think about, but it seems that it cannot feel anything, even if it speaks in a way that makes it seem like it's doing that, which is where the uncanniness comes from. So is that correct? It can't feel. Is there a point on the horizon? Is there a vista over which AI will be able to feel? How close might we ever come? And this is where we're coming back to the Terminator Skynet thing. How close will we ever come to AI being sentient? Because I think everyone in the room wants to know at what point a robot's going to take over.
Yeah. So artificial intelligence, we can also reach a point at which we can meaningfully talk about artificial feeling. And artificial feeling would be something like an awareness of artificial emotion, where artificial emotion has to have something that is a replication of neurological basis, because this is where the emotions happen. So even if that happens, I imagine it will still be a question of whether this is artificial emotion or artificial feeling, which, presumably it will be. But again, it won't be human because it will be just a replication of that. So a further question, which we will continue in the next hour, would the ethical implications of what the robots can feel and how we relate to that and all of that. That's kind of entirely a new topic. But yes, so in short, yes, I think there is no problem with conceptualizing that future where there will be artificial emotions and feelings on the part of AI.
And another point of disagreement.
Because would that be actual, genuine feeling, or would that simply be a playing out, a scenario based on what it's been programmed to do?
I'll take your Skynet and I'll raise you Gattaca.
Okay,
There's a wonderful film called Gattaca. Might have to wait until you're old enough to see it, because it's
I am old enough, just to let you know.
Are you? Okay, oh sorry, I wasn't sure. So Gattaca is a film about programming humans, making humans encoded to be a certain way, to be machines of a certain kind. That's a more likely future, whereby we make ourselves more robotic. We're already in the process of doing this, and it seems to me the prevailing evidence is that that's the direction we're going in, rather than the direction of making machines more human. We're making humans more machine-like. So I think it's more likely we'll program our DNA, program our neurologies to be more robotic. So I suspect Gattaca is the more likely future than Skynet.
It's very disconcerting. But thank you both. We do want to take some questions. Hopefully there are plenty.
I really don't think that AI as it is now is on a trajectory to becoming conscious, but it will certainly seem as though machines have conscious minds, and that's a danger.
If consciousness is a property of the brain, then it's subject to what we call causal determinism, physical determinism.
This idea of libertarian free will, I think, is entirely wrong, and I also think it's unnecessary.
These systems will become more and more like us. People will treat them and want them to be treated as though they're human. The challenge now is it seems to be going faster and faster.
We are terrible at projecting out long-term consequences.
Robot rights. I can see it coming.
We've got a question over here. So do you want to say it nice and loud Okay, so really good question from the audience about the ethics of using AI and the power that it takes up, the usage that it soaks up. Alex, we'll come to you. What do you think about the ethical side of using AI simply in terms of the impact on local communities?
It's a great question. So I think there's an element of it that is rooted in sustainability, this question of how do we find a sustainable future? I think one of the biggest problems is to sustainability. I was asked this question by one of my students, what's the biggest threat facing, why can't we create a sustainable future? And my answer was simple: individualism. Everyone has their own individual wants and needs, etc. So the problem we have is how do you resolve those things? And unfortunately, solutions to that are either to dampen individualism, which feels like a form of authoritarianism, which is troubling for all sorts of reasons, or it's to say we have to give up certain wants, we have to give up certain desires that we have as individuals. The problem we have is in creating AI, many companies have a vested interest in turning AI into an individual. And by the way, is there more than one AI? I always think that's a really interesting question to ask. Is there more? We always talk about, Alexa, Siri. Sorry if I'm sending off everyone's devices. Yeah. But the problem with thinking of them as individuals is that they're just code. And so they're not individuals. But the problem is if we give them these individual rights, suddenly they'll have rights to be protected. We've already made companies individuals, for instance, persons, corporate persons. And this is deeply problematic because, again, it's going to expedite the issue. So I think that the technological answer is the simplest one, which is find more energy efficient means of keeping AI running. Because again, the Luddites won't win. I would like to just say, switch it all off. That isn't going to work. But equally, you can also call for compensation to the people who are poorly affected by the vast energy costs and water costs that are going into it. So there are no easy solutions here. And by the way, most people veer away from problems that impact their own lives. Most people would rather tweet about, for instance, issues of slavery from hundreds of years ago, which are serious issues and we should be concerned about them. But there is slavery and indentured servitude happening right now. The problem is you'd have to give up your phone to avoid that. And so few people are going to want to do that, to give up their technology. So we're kind of in a complicit situation where we don't actually want to pay the price that we're going to have to pay for these sorts of things. We're often acting against our best interests because we feel like the immediate interest trumps the long-term interest. So I don't have hope for you. I'm really sorry. I wish I did. But all I would say is it's the younger generation, it's the people asking the questions here who will have that opportunity to say, we can't let this be our future.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything to add on that, Anna?
Yes, I agree with everything that Alex has said. But the only thing I would say is perhaps these two things don't need to be at the expense of one another. In other words, whereas there's obviously ethical requirement and demand to supply people with the basics, there is also that kind of need and requirement to invest in these technological things. So perhaps we need to up both rather than one or the other. And just there is always money to be found, from budget. So it's just really a matter of ethical and other kinds of priority that will drive these answers and actions.
Brilliant. Thank you. And a really good question. Thank you. Question number 2. Yes, sir. Okay. Great question and a surprisingly deep voice. What do you think is more powerful, the human brain or AI?
Am I going first on this one again? Okay, great.
No,
thanks,
Amna, you go first.
Sorry, Amna.
Human brain, in short.
Human brain. Why?
This is not empirically verified. It's just a really intuitively based answer that human brain is magnificently complex, that we know so little about it. So like I said, there's no proof, but it's just the intuition that it can never be replicated to that extent, and that complexity can never be matched by artificial intelligence.
What about you, Alex?
I agree, not least because the human brain controls these little digits that means we can turn things off. It's also our data that feeds into the machine that makes it knowledgeable about these things. So it's premised upon us. People often say, is the brain a computer? Definitely not, but the computer is a brain. Yeah. It's not a chicken or egg situation, it's dinosaur or chicken situation.
But is it the case then that some human brains are more powerful than AI, or just the human brain, because of its intricacies in general, is more powerful than AI?
So I understand why when reading a poem written by an AI, we can be impressed by this. But what we're impressed by is its ability to almost trick us into thinking this could have been made by my son. This could have been written by a person. So we're still marveling at the human mind. We're just doing it vicariously. So I think that's what I'm saying. So there's a conceptual dependency, there's a technological dependency, there's a natural dependency. All of it comes back to us, which could be a bad thing, by the way, because our brains might be more powerful, but that doesn't make them good. It doesn't make them impressive. It just means that it's more powerful than the AI.
Fantastic. Right, we'll do one more question. So we'll make this the final question. We talked about emotions and recreating emotions. What do we mean? What is it that AI would have to do to recreate emotions? Are we talking about hormones, or what are we talking about here?
Yes. So like I said before, so for an emotion, there has to be some kind of neurological base, some kind of a change in the organism. So like in the case of pain, you have a C neuron firing. That's like a neurological process. And you being aware of this C neuron firing is your feeling of that emotion. So in case of artificial intelligence, it has to be some kind of process that would in turn make the AI aware of it in some kind of artificially conscious way. So it has to be two things, not just one. It has to be awareness, and it has to be the process and awareness of that process.
So we don't create AI out of neurons and C fibers, etc. So I'm gonna say this: we program it with language. So I can throw the question back to you, and I'm gonna preempt it. By the way, this is a rhetorical question; you don't need to answer. But the question would be put like this: I've never felt giddy in my life. Never ever felt giddiness. It's sad, isn't it? I've never been giddy ever in my life. Could you describe it to me? The answer is no. You definitely can't describe it to me. So you can't describe it to an AI either. You cannot give AI giddiness. It's not possible. So my answer to you is no. An AI cannot feel. So the feelings may well be the C fibers firing. They may well be that, but that's not what we mean by those things. What we mean by fear or giddiness or happiness isn't the C fibers or anything like that. A lovely example of this was a philosopher who said, imagine a Martian landed. This Martian doesn't have the same biology as you, but they put a hand near a fire and they go, ow. Would you say that Martian felt pain? We might say yes. But why? Because it doesn't have nerves. So how could it feel pain? But a mad person comes in, puts their hand in the fire and goes, are they feeling pain? I don't know, because they're laughing. So the point is, what is the pain? Is it the expression of pain, or is it the feeling inside? And I would argue it can't be the feeling inside, because we wouldn't be able to describe it to each other. But we all know what we mean by fear. We all know what we mean by giddiness. But an AI can't, because we can't tell it.
Yeah, brilliant. Another fantastic question. Thank you. Well, that's about all we've got time for here on Unbelievable. My guests today have been Dr. Alex Carter and Dr. Amna Whiston. We've been talking about AI and creativity. We've barely scratched the surface, but at least we've made some steps forward. I'm going to go and ask ChatGPT where the nearest coffee shop is. Join us again on Unbelievable. Take care for now.